Well, hello and welcome to Beyond the Sermon. I'm Tammy DeLau, and obviously this is a special podcast. Sunday, Steve talked to us about the red dragon, and there's so much that he was unable to share with us. So he did a short little mini sermon to kind of fill us in on who that red dragon is. I am so excited to share it with you. Watch it with me.
Hey everybody, I wanted to include a little bit of extra teaching that I didn't get time for from the message this past weekend because I think we brought up one major question. And that question is, all right, we talked about the red dragon. Where did he come from? I mean, why in the world is there a red dragon to begin with? And why does it seem like God is kind of waiting to deal with them? If we're in this time, perhaps between the resurrection and the second coming of Christ, the red dragon, Satan, is running rampant. And so I want to talk about that. And this is one of those times where, once again, it's really important that we say, we believe the Bible's not written to us, it's written for us. Because what I don't want to do is say this is absolutely, positively, 100% where Satan came from. And what I want to do instead is to say, what is it that the biblical audience believed about the origins of Satan and all of that? And what is it that Revelation is trying to say based on that? So this is really a teaching about what the ancient people believed. To do that, we have to understand a word. And that word is the Hebrew word Elohim. Elohim. Now, you may have heard this word before if you grew up in church or something like that. Elohim is God. I mean, when we translate it God. But we don't always mean, or at least the Bible doesn't always mean, Yahweh, God. And this can be a little surprising to people. For instance, on the most basic level, whenever we're talking about false gods in the Bible, the Hebrew will often call them Elohim. And by context, people understand what they mean. Now, there's no capital letters like there are for us in Hebrew, so we can't tell, big G God, small g God, anything like that. It's just the context that we understand. And in the ancient world, people would have assumed that there were many Elohim. God, even those outside the Jewish faith, would have understood there was one sovereign God over all. Of course, the Hebrews called him Yahweh because that's how he introduced himself to them. People outside the faith simply called him El, E-L. And he was the great God, the big God that was kind of in charge of all the other gods. And that was how people understood him to be. We have this interesting story in Genesis chapter 11. We know it as the Tower of Babel. It's really the Tower of Babylon. And it's a story of after Adam and Eve and after the flood narrative and all that stuff, the people who are on earth, the population rebuilds, and people on earth come together, and they come together in a city, and they say, let's build a tower for ourselves. It's a ziggurat, which is like an elevator for the gods. And God comes down and he inspects it, and he sees there's a problem. And the problem is not like a building inspector would say, hey, there's a problem with the structure or something. The problem is this: God had instructed the people of earth to spread out and to fulfill their directive to bring the reign of Yahweh over all the earth. And instead of doing that, what they did is they gathered all together in one city. And instead of calling God to all of those parts of the earth, they wanted to access God in that one place. And they said, we're going to build a way for God to come down to us. And God said, that's not going to happen. And God says something in that passage in Genesis chapter 11. His wording is curious. He says in verse 7, come, let's go down there and confuse their language so they will not understand one another's speech. Now, who is he talking to? This is very similar language to back in the creation narrative when he speaks to a group of people. He says, come, let's make man in our image. Now, what is this? We've always tended to assume in our world that this is the Trinity, but ancient people would not have understood that. What they would have thought is that he is talking to other Elohim. other gods. This is foreign to our concept of things. They're not gods like you and I think of them, but they would be created beings, kind of lesser created beings. At Babel, God confuses their language, and the people spread out over all the earth. Traditionally, the ancient people would have understood that there would have been 70 different areas of the earth. 70. It's important. And that 70 were ruled by the lesser Elohim. God appointed Elohim over each of them. In fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 32, we read about this, and this is Moses speaking to the people of Israel. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, or another translation, when he divided the nations and divided the human race, he set the boundaries of the people according to the number of, some Bible translations say, the people of Israel. He divided the number according to the people of Israel. The literal Hebrew, he divided the nations according to the sons of God, according to the Elohim, the number of the Elohim. In other words, he divided the nation, or the earth, into these nations, 70 traditionally. And verse 8 says, when he gave the nations their inheritance and divided the human race, he set the boundaries of the people according to the number of the people of Israel. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his own inheritance. So if we say that he set the boundaries of the people according to the number of the sons of God, Yahweh's portion is Israel. So there's 70 nations, at least one of which is Israel itself. He sets Israel apart and says, no, I'm going to be their Elohim. I'm going to be their God. And so other nations have other gods. So again, this is how ancient people would have understood this. Later on in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 17 refers to demons. The Hebrew name for demons is Shedim, as Elohim. And he uses that interchangeably. And so what ancient people believed is that the 70 nations are the domains of other Elohim. Sometimes they're also called guardians, or guardian cherubs. Cherub, we think of a little fat baby with a harp. That's not how ancient people would have thought of that. They would have been guardians of something, of an area. And instead of administering Yahweh's rule over their area, they rebelled against Yahweh. And they created chaos on the earth. And they lured Yahweh's children into sin. And God had to correct that. It's not a coincidence that when Jesus sends out his followers to minister for the first time, he sends out 70. It's a taking back. By far, Psalm 82 is the passage that stands up as the most curious, and that underscores how it is that what people would have believed. It says, verse 1, God stands in the divine assembly. He pronounces judgment among the Elohim. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? And then he gives this whole, why are you rebelling against me? He judges the other Elohim. And then we learn also that what's going to happen to them is they're going to be made as men. So they're going to lose their immortality and be made mortal so that they can be judged and be subject to eternal fire. Now, all of this is what ancient people believed. Satan, what we know as Satan, they would have called him the Satan or the accuser, it's his title, is probably the chief rebel. They would have believed that he is the one who's in charge of the 70 and perhaps has an area of his own, but more than likely just rules over those 70, that he led that rebellion. And there are other helpers, spiritual beings that help him as well, not just those 70. There are thousands and thousands of others. But that's sort of the idea of what ancient people believe. So every time we read Revelation, that's the background of the red dragon. That's where people believe that he came from. The concept of there being multiple gods was not as strange to them as it is to us. They were comfortable in a world with spiritual beings having great power and authority in the world.
Okay, I am sure your mind was blown like my mind was blown. Definitely, they thought different than we think now. But man, we have been given a new lens with which to read Revelation, understanding what they understood. So I have a favorite movie, and there's a quote in it that says, "The more I learn, the more I realize, the less I know." If you are like me, you have so many questions, and we want to hear those questions. Some of you have already been dropping them in the comment section on YouTube. We want to hear those questions. So let us know. You can email us at admin@bethanychurchlex.org. You can drop them in the YouTube comment section. You can call church, whatever you want to do, let us know, because we want to answer as many of those questions as we can. So that's it. That's Beyond the Sermon this week. We will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.